Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. My name is Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I am joined by my co-host.
I'm Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian, and I'm cleansed of 1953 thanks to this season, 2012.
Man,
Still.
all right, you're still on 1953. So
No, Josh, it's been washed away via the films of 2012.
Yeah, all right, including quite a few that you didn't really like, but
That's true.
It's true.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Totally fair.
So we have finished our season on the films of 2012. And as we always do at the end of each season, we do this little epilogue episode looking back at our categories, what we picked, what other options we could have picked, and some suggestions from you, our listeners. So we're going to just get right into that, I think.
Josh, for the box office champ, we covered the Avengers, which we all still like quite a bit, but this is troubling, Josh, as I look over the highest grossing films of 2012. We could circle this year as maybe the year that IP started taking over here. Top 10 movies: The Avengers, Skyfall, The Dark Knight Rises, The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey, Ice Age, Continental Drift, The Twilight Saga, Breaking Dawn Part 2, The Amazing Spider-Man, Madagascar 3, Europe's Most Wanted, The Hunger Games, Men in Black 3. All IP or sequels, and a lot of bad movies in there.
Yeah, I mean, a couple good ones too, but yeah, I looked at that list too, and I just thought, what a depressing lineup it is to read there. And I think you can look at every year from 2012 to now, and it's going to be just as depressing to look at.
Yeah, and I think back of like our 1980 season when we were like, hey, let's do 9 to 5. It was the second highest grossing film of the year. And you're like, what? How is that? They wouldn't fit here.
No, certainly not. So, yeah, kind of sad. But as you said, despite being really a harbinger of a lot of that, we did enjoy The Avengers still. It's still entertaining. Those movies can be enjoyable. It's just the fact that they crowd out everything else, I think, is what's depressing.
I mean, I like the Avengers quite a bit. And also depressing is the diminishing returns on Marvel lately.
True, which we also talked about. So for the first feature, this was a category, I think, where we struggled a bit because it's fairly recent. It's still a bit hard to tell who has a debut that's going to lead to an interesting career. I thought we did a good job picking Brandon Cronenberg and Antiviral, and he's made a couple of pretty interesting films since then. So we didn't have a ton of options. Dave, I think, I don't know, you were interested in talking about Seth MacFarlane and Ted, which was his directorial debut. Of course, he's known for a lot of other things beyond directing movies, but that was the first film that he directed. We also mentioned Josh Trank, an interesting sort of controversial figure in his first film, Chronicle. We almost went with Lorraine Scafaria and her film Seeking a Friend for the End of the World, which I don't really care for, but she certainly went on to some interesting stuff later with Hustlers. But again, I feel like with the limited choices that we had, it was good to go with Brandon Cronenberg.
Yeah, I mean, I hate Chronicle, so I'm glad we didn't do that. I was open to Lorraine Scafaria and Seth MacFarlane. I also said, like, it felt like such a weak year for first-time directors. I was ready to cut the category for this year and do animated movies because there were so many good ones.
Yeah, and I think we could have cut it and would have been all right. But I liked Antiviral, so I was glad to. That was the only movie we covered this season that I'd never seen before. So I was glad to get a chance to watch something.
Well, Josh, for our next episode, we did The Flop, and you guys made me rewatch John Carter, which I don't know if I'll ever forgive you for. I hated that movie then, slept through it, as you mentioned in the episode, and upon rewatching, felt I made the right choice. The only other one that I really had in there was Rise of the Guardians, right? I had thought something like Battleship could have been in there, but as we just learned, IP was king, and that was a big hit. So did you have any other flop ideas there, Josh?
Yeah, I think The Three Stooges was the other one that came up as a possibility. I know, Dave, you're a fan of that one and mentioned that it could have been one of your picks, but that was from the Farrelly brothers. That was a failure from them, I guess you could say.
Well, they're doing just fine on their own lately.
They are, yeah. They broke up, and instead of doing
Yes.
lowbrow comedy, they're now doing treacly inspirational garbage instead.
All right, Josh, let us know about the Cannes Film Festival.
Yeah,
this
so
year.
the Cannes Film Festival. We talked about the Palme d'Or winner, which is Michael Haneke's Amour, which a tough watch, but I think a really interesting and well-made film that we all appreciated. And I feel like often what happens when we get to this in the epilogue is I end up saying, and at Cannes that year were a bunch of movies that I've never heard of. But that's not the case here. I actually have a really long list of movies that were all in competition at Cannes that I feel like are pretty well known, or at least from filmmakers that we know. Beyond the Hills, which is from Christian Mungiu, whose film 4 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days we talked about in our 2007 season, I believe it was. David Cronenberg's Cosmopolis. Of course, we talked about Brandon Cronenberg. Holy Motors, The Hunt, a film that we did an episode on later. Andrew Dominik's Killing Them Softly, In Another Country by Hong Sang-soo, which stars Isabelle Huppert, who was in Amour. Lawless by John Hillcoat. Like Someone in Love from Abbas Kiarostami, which I think is a great, great film. Moonrise Kingdom. Jason, I know you love Wes Anderson. That was in competition as well. Mud, which is a movie I really like. Lee Daniels' The Paperboy, and Rust and Bone from Jacques Audiard. So a lot of movies that I think we're all pretty familiar with, actually.
I'd say a few that us that we're familiar with, and Josh, you're just showing your film geekdom by knowing all of them. But a more worth watching, and those 2 lead performances are just top notch.
Yeah. Oh, totally. I mean, and I'm glad that was the one. I think there's some other interesting movies on that list, but Amour, probably the most notable in there.
And what a year for documentaries, Josh. We had so many to choose from that were all just excellent. We, of course, covered Stories We Tell by Sarah Polley, which we all really like upon rewatching. I still like it. Was very nice to teach you guys about Bon Iver. Really, that was a highlight of the season. But Searching for Sugar Man, which won Best Documentary. I love that movie. I would have been happy to do that. We kind of shied away from it because we've done music documentaries before, but highly recommend that. And also seeing Rodriguez in concert. So,
Oh, did you see him in concert?
I did see him. He opened
nice.
for Brian Wilson when I saw him. So that was pretty cool. Is he still alive, Rodriguez?
I don't know, but I do enjoy that movie.
I hope he's still alive. We were going to do The Act of Killing, which is a hard watch.
Yeah.
And so we didn't choose that. Jiro Dreams of Sushi, maybe the most influential documentary of the year. I'm going to just say it, Josh. Bonus episode of that coming up.
Yeah, I think this is the right time to say it. We are going to do a bonus episode on Jiro Dreams of Sushi, in part because, as you said, this was such a great year for documentaries. There were so many options. We decided to add another one.
Josh, The Queen of Versailles, which is kind of one of those films that is still relevant with Succession and this battle with the Murdoch family in real life. And The Imposter, which I think was one of these, you see it now all the time, more in these kind of limited series or podcasts where it's a true crime thing with a twist. And I know one that you've seen that I haven't that you really like is First Cousin Once Removed.
Yeah, that's Alan Berliner, who's a pretty fascinating filmmaker doing a lot of personal types of films. And that was about his cousin and his sort of decline. Another tough watch movie, really, mental decline and, similar themes to Amour, but really affecting film. So worth checking out. All of those, really, right? A whole list of stuff that's interesting to see. And we'll get to watch Jiro again for that bonus episode. So that'll be cool.
Yay.
My pick was Sound of My Voice with Britt Marling and directed by Zal Batmanli, which was my number 1 movie on my top 10 list at the time in 2012. And I thought held up pretty well. Other possibilities from me, Frances Ha, the Noah Baumbach film, but we have talked about Noah Baumbach before, so kind of wanted to go in a different direction. And as mentioned before, that was at Cannes, Mud, the Jeff Nichols film with Matthew McConaughey, which I think is just one of McConaughey's absolute best performances. And Jeff Nichols, who's made a variety of different kinds of films, I feel like that's almost like maybe it is his best work. That's a movie I've watched multiple times and holds up really well, I think.
What I liked about this, Josh, was that now I do want to go back and rewatch Frances Ha, which we like pretty much all the Baumbach movies, but I don't think I've seen that since my first watch. And Jeff Nichols, I actually have a few to catch up on there, Josh.
Yeah, I think I do too, early in terms of his early films. But, have you seen Mud?
Yes, I've seen Mud. It's
Okay,
quite
yeah,
good.
that's definitely.
I love Mud.
All right, Josh. We always do a foreign film because we're cultured people.
Indeed.
Uh-huh. And we pick The Hunt, of course, from our friend Thomas Vinterberg, loyal listener to Awesome Movie Year. And with my guy, Mads/Maz Mikkelsen, But I think that was a really good pick. We learned a lot, not just about their collaborative efforts, but we rooted some of the Dogma 95 stuff in there and just see how these guys are just kind of really making a lot of great projects still to this day. Some of the other ideas that we had were Kon-Tiki, No, A Royal Affair, and of course, The Raid. Josh, do you want to chime in on any of those or some other ones that you suggested?
Well, Royal Affair, I think also starring Mads Mikkelsen. So really, options there for him. I mentioned, a bunch of the things that I just mentioned that had been at Cannes, I think were some suggestions that I had put forth, including Holy Motors, Like Someone in Love, Rust and Bone, In Another Country, Post Tenebris Lux, all of which I think could have been interesting for us. Along the lines of The Raid, I think I mentioned Johnny Toe's Drug War, which is another foreign action film. And I think we were sort of toward the end considering Wajda from Haifa Al-Mansour, which is a really good film, I think. And it was the first Saudi Arabian film directed by a woman. And she's gone on to do a lot of more mainstream, like Hollywoody stuff. But it's just a really sweet coming of age story about a young girl. So that's a movie that I would recommend seeing as well.
Very good, Josh. Thank you for your recommendation.
Of course.
My recommendation came in my pick, Josh. It's a film I had seen and liked and chose it as my pick. Can you believe that?
Different from 1953.
Yeah. I went with Goon, and I'm so glad we rewatched it. It's wonderful to this day. And that, of course, is our friend Sean William Scott playing a minor league hockey enforcer. And we got to talk a little about Canadian cinema. And this was a big year for Canadian cinema for us. Also, Michael Dowse, interesting filmmaker. I look forward to seeing some of the things I missed from him. My other picks, Josh, Looper, Rian Johnson, maybe his best movie, I'd say. What do you think?
Yeah, maybe so. I don't know. I honestly, I think I probably have enjoyed the Knives Out and Glass Onion a bit more, but Looper is really good. I would have been happy to watch that again and talk about it.
All right. Maybe Knives Out 1 and then Looper and then Brick, but that's me.
All right. What a great filmmaker. Those are all really good movies.
Yeah. The other thing, of course, as you mentioned, Moonrise Kingdom. If I had to do a letterbox list on Go for Jason as my letterbox, and it was Wes Anderson movies, I think Moonrise Kingdom would probably be number one, and if not number one, number two for me on my Wes Anderson list. So that and Royal Tenenbaums. So that was a tough one that I said no to only because we've covered Wes Anderson a couple of times already.
Yeah, and my dislike for Wes Anderson, but I would say if I made that list, I would also put Moonrise Kingdom at number one. I feel like I find that to be the most tolerable of Wes Anderson's films.
Well, now that I know how much you hate Wes Anderson, I'm going to just pick him every season.
Yeah, no matter what. 1953's Wes Anderson film is coming up. We talked about the Sundance Grand Jury Prize winner, Beasts of the Southern Wild from Ben Zeitlin, which we had a pretty, lively disagreement about. I was not a fan of that one.
You were a real dick in that episode.
I was a real dick to that film. That was also a first feature consideration. That is his debut. Interesting kind of assortment of a lot of things that I was not familiar with. As opposed to Cannes, a lot of the Sundance stuff I wasn't really familiar with. But the Grand Jury Prize for documentary went to a movie called The House I Live In, which is, I believe, about the war on drugs that I've not seen. The Dramatic Audience Award went to The Sessions, with Helen Hunt and John Hawkes, the drama about the sex surrogate, which is pretty good. I don't know. Have you seen that one, Jason?
I never saw it. I do like John Hawkes quite a bit. And Helen Hunt, one of the most awarded actresses of our time, Josh.
Yeah, maybe not justifiably, but is good in that film. I'm not a big fan of hers, but that is a good film. One of these things that could have been really sentimental, but I think is done well. The documentary audience award went to The Invisible War, which is a documentary about sexual abuse in the military. Other films that were at Sundance include Searching for Sugar Man, as we mentioned, and The Queen of Versailles, which we also mentioned. Mike Birbiglia's Sleepwalk with Me, which I think is a fun, kind of maybe underrated film.
It is. And that would have been a good, was that his first movie? That would have been an interesting first feature to think
Yeah,
about.
I think he's only directed a couple movies, that and the other one that he directed about the improv troupe, whose name is escaping me right now.
It's like Don't Think Twice or something.
There you go. That's it. Don't Think Twice. Of course, our favorite Safety Not Guaranteed was at Sundance, and Ava DuVernay's Middle of Nowhere, another one. That was her second film before she kind of made it big.
Big year for Sundance, huh?
Yeah.
So after that, Josh, did we go to our Best Picture winner?
Yes.
All right. Well, that was Argo, and go fuck yourself, buddy. Of course, we're in an Affleck renaissance right now. Listen to our episode of Piecing It Together that we did with Dave on air, and we like Affleck. I'd say 4 for 5 for him as a director. We've already mentioned Amour and Beasts of the Southern Wild, both up for Best Picture. Django Unchained, that could have been a pick for a personal pick. I know we've covered Tarantino a lot, but I think that's a really good Tarantino movie. Les Miserables.
I just, as I was looking through this, I that was the one that really stuck out. Like, really, that made a Best Picture nomination, but it did. That's all I can say.
All right, there you go. I think we'll leave it at that for Les Mis. Life of Pi, we talked about Ang Lee and the amazing cinematography in that film. Lincoln, we did talk about it for a minute there. I still think not a great Spielberg movie. I know you liked it more than I did. Silver Linings Playbook, maybe my favorite David O. Russell movie. I really like that movie. And of course, Zero Dark 30, Catherine Bigelow, between that and The Hurt Locker, really making some good war pictures.
Yeah, I also really like Silver Linings Playbook. I think that was certainly high on my top 10 list when I was looking at possibilities for my pick. And I think Zero Dark 30 is really good. I like that more than The Hurt Locker, I remember at the time. So, a fairly solid lineup. I do think, well, other than my dislike of Beasts of the Southern Wild, I do think Les Mis kind of stands out just as being this like kind of tired Hollywood product. I think that's almost like obligatory to throw in there.
It's interesting because, this is, I don't know what year it started when they were like, we can go up to 10, but I think Les Mis maybe got in there because they're the extra nominees you could have.
That is quite possible. So we had then Dave's pick, which was Spring Breakers. What other thoughts did you have on your pick, Dave?
Yeah, aside from some of the ones that you guys have already brought up during this conversation, I'll throw a couple other ones that I was really thinking about. Of course, Prometheus is a movie that I love, the Alien prequel from Ridley Scott, which I've talked about on a bunch of podcasts over the years, so I figured we didn't need to do that. I was also thinking about Seven Psychopaths from Martin McDonagh, which was my number one movie of the year, so obviously it was something I was considering. And then the other one I was thinking about, The Man with the Iron Fist, the RZA's directorial debut, which I haven't seen since a Drunken Midnight movie, so I don't even remember if it's any good, but it's the RZA, so, would have been fun.
Yeah, I would have been down with any of those, to be honest with you. But it's your pick, and I'm glad we did Spring Breakers. It made me go back and watch that and The Beach Bum, so...
Yeah, I could have done without watching Spring Breakers again, but I will say that I was happier to watch Spring Breakers than I would have been to watch Seven Psychopaths, which I really hated. I kind of like Prometheus. I know, Dave, you're like the world's number one Prometheus fan, and I'm not there, but I do think it's sort of unfairly maligned. It would have been interesting to revisit.
I love you, Prometheus. It's Prometheus. Reference to the critic.
Yep.
Our cult classic pick was Dread, which Jason did not care for, but Dave and I both like, and I think is a really, one of the better action movies of the last decade, and certainly one of the better comic book adaptations. Speaking of, I think, Jason, this might have been your suggestion in that sort of B-movie action realm, was The Gray, the Liam Neeson movie, which I think I agree is like one of the better Liam Neeson action movies. Was that your call on that? I think.
I mean, I did put it there, and I'm pissed at you guys because I've still never seen it, and I love me some Carnahan and I love me some Neeson. This would have been a perfect time to watch it, but it's tough to track down. I don't think it's streaming anywhere at this point, but I really wanted to see The Gray. I still want to see it, and you guys made me sit through Dread, so F off you two.
I mean, I didn't realize you hadn't seen it. You definitely should. It's absolutely your kind of film. And I think it's good. As far as those Liam Neeson action movies go, it's definitely toward the top. I had thrown in a couple more ideas. Video Diary of a Lost Girl, which is a movie that I saw at our friend Chad Clinton Freeman's Polygrind Film Festival that has actually gone on, unlike most of the movies from that festival, which I'm pretty sure were shown only in the Polygrind Film Festival and never anywhere else except perhaps Chad's living room, has actually gone on to have quite a cult following. John Dies at the End, which is a kind of horror thing that was a cult novel. And, more Joseph Gordon-Levitt after Looper, Premium Rush, the movie where it's like an action thing where he's a bike messenger. And Jason, have you seen that? That seems like another kind of lean action movie that you would enjoy.
I mean, I'd have been down for any of these. And I know we were actually thinking about the Three Stooges for that as well. So
true. Is there really a cult for the Three Stooges?
Me?
I don't know. How did we miss on The Gray? This is a,
You can just watch The Gray at home for your own enjoyment, Jason. It is
mean, between missing The Gray on this and missing Mighty Ducks when we did whatever year that was, 92 or 94, really just some terrible choices on our part.
I mean,
Josh.
Jason, you're the Mighty Ducks guy. You could have picked it for that year and you did it.
I admit I blew it, Josh. I can admit that.
Okay. We made up for it we've done 2 hockey movies on this podcast. How many hockey movies do we need?
I mean, as I said, it seems like hockey has a greater connect rate with better movies on, than a lot of other sports.
Maybe so.
Josh, and then we came to our audience choice, correct?
Yes.
Which, of course, we did the year of Mark Duplass, and you idiots picked Safety Not Guaranteed when we served up on a silver platter Jeff Who Lives at Home and Your Sister's Sister. Okay, I had a lot of ideas for this category. There were music documentaries. I already mentioned Searching for Sugar Man. There was the LCD Sound System movie, Shut Up and Play the Hits, and Marley, of course, about the legendary Bob Marley. I had Indie Romance Gone Wrong, which would have been fun. Ruby Sparks, Celeste and Jesse Forever, and Lola Versus. I think that would have been a really good category and really spoke to this year. Animated classics, Wreck-It Ralph, Brave, Frankenweenie, and Paranorman. Come on, some good stuff there. And the world of Judd Apatow. This is 40, the 5-year engagement, and Wanderlust. He directed This is 40 and produced the other 2.
Yeah, and we had done a Judd Apatow audience choice category in either, was it 03 or 07, one of those, when we ended up talking about Superbad. So I think that was why we wanted to steer away from Judd Apatow. But I think we made the right choice, even if the audience made the wrong choice. I feel like the Duplass category was an interesting one. I remember in that indie romance category liking Ruby Sparks, but not really liking those other 2. So I don't know how that would have worked out if we had put that up to a vote.
Yeah, I mean, the real strong one there is the animated movies, right?
Yeah. I mean, Brave, I think, is maybe one of the weaker Pixar movies, but Wreck-It Ralph is a lot of fun. Paranorman, I really like, is, a great film from Laika. And Frankenweenie's all right. It's, not Burton's best, but, you can go back to the original short and talk about that too. And that's sort of the origins of a lot of what Tim Burton does.
Josh, here were some other movies that we had, that I had marked down from this year. There was Haywire, the Steven Soderbergh film starring Gina Carano. Dave, of course, a huge fan of Gina Carano's latest effort, the Hunter Biden movie.
Oh, sure.
I'm glad we didn't have to talk about Gina Carano, really.
Project X, which I know you hate, I didn't love, but I think was a moment in time, like that found footage type thing, right? And party movie, right?
Sure. Why not?
Cabin in the Woods.
Yeah, that's definitely a pretty influential film.
Of course, it was a year, so Steven Soderbergh had to make more than one movie. This was Magic Mike, the first one, and that's gone on to become a whole thing, not just a franchise, but a live show in Vegas. I actually auditioned to be the MC not too long ago. They picked a Scottish singer to take that part, so I don't feel bad about losing that part. Robot and Frank, I really like that movie with Frank Langella getting a robot to like help him around the house because he's getting older and he just uses the robot to help him commit like crimes. I think that's a good movie. Yeah. Compliance, a very tough watch, but a good film. Pat Healy, great performance. Arbitrage, I'm a big fan of that one. And of course, if we didn't mention The Master, our PTA heads would get angry at us. Perks of Being a Wallflower, good movie also.
Yeah, some interesting stuff. I feel like, I mean, Compliance is definitely a tough watch. I feel like tough watches were a theme, even though we steered away from some of them and like The Act of Killing, but we still ended up with quite a few movies that are a bit difficult to get through, but rewarding. So glad that we did that. And we had some good responses here on social media from people suggesting films that they wanted to hear about, including some that we've talked about. So I'll run through a few of those. Joe Cox suggested Dave's favorite Prometheus, as well as Skyfall and Hitchcock, the Hitchcock biopic, which I think didn't really. This was the year of the 2 Hitchcock movies, right? There was an HBO one. Was it called The Girl? That's about the making of the birds and his relationship with Tippi Hedren, I believe. So yeah, there was that. Chad Clinton Freeman, who we've mentioned, suggested The Place Beyond the Pines, Cloud Atlas from the Wachowskis, and Django Unchained and Chronicle, which we've already mentioned. Our good friend Victoria Ribeiro, her main suggestion, Jiro Dreams of Sushi. She says, I would love to hear Jason talk about this one for sure. So thanks, Victoria.
Well, Victoria, if you want me to talk, then talk I will.
Yes. The Queen of Versailles, The Hunger Games, Magic Mike, and The Campaign, which is that Zach Galifianakis, Will Ferrell comedy, I believe. Did you see that one, Jason?
I don't think I saw that one, but why not? Let's do it. Let's go right now.
Good.
Let's watch. Let's do a watch along and talk while we watch it right now.
Sure. Ian Zeitzer gave us Here Comes the Boom.
It's still Ian. Still Ian.
I'm sorry, Ian Zeitzer. Here Comes the Boom. Now I'm gonna mispronounce his name because he had the audacity to suggest that we talk about a Kevin James movie.
Of course, I back in the day co-wrote a script called Paddington Goodbar Will Kick Your Ass about a nerd who finds out he has super strength and to save his dad's sporting goods store becomes an underground MMA fighter. And Kevin James really blew the chance for me to make that movie because of Here Comes the Boom.
Yeah, damn you, Kevin James. And also, that movie is bad. Our former guest, Mike Pravat, suggested The Master, Prometheus, Cabin in the Woods, Perks of Being a Wallflower. He's apparently a fan of Seven Psychopaths and The Hobbit, Django Unchained, The Session. So a bunch of things that have come up already. My sister, Brandy Bell, suggested Wreck-It Ralph, Silver Linings Playbook. She likes Celeste and Jesse Forever, I guess. Also, she said she wouldn't mind seeing No as the foreign film pick. She lives in Chile, but it's not one of my favorites. I like No, actually. I think that's interesting. But of course, that's from a perspective outside the country where it was made and, different to get a perspective if you're more familiar with the culture. Probably.
Well, we don't care about that, do we?
No. Let's see. What else we got that's different? George Hannah Wilson suggested a movie called Excision, which I am not familiar with at all. Do you know that one, Jason?
No, I don't.
All right. Well, thank you, George, for whatever that was. Darren Lundberg from the Nostalgia Cast suggested It's Such a Beautiful Day, the animated film from Don Hertzfeld, which is a really crazy, beautiful, emotionally affecting film that's sort of a compilation of shorts. I would definitely recommend that. That would have been another interesting animated movie. Yeah, it's really good. It's only 62 minutes or something too. That I liked a lot. Adam S. brought up Sinister, the horror film with Ethan Hawke. Captain Salazar, who I don't know if that was on Twitter or what he's a captain of, but Captain Salazar mentioned Resident Evil Retribution and Underworld Awakening, later installments in both of those franchises.
Is that really Chad in disguise?
I don't think so. And of course, my favorite response here from Ryan Olbrich, who disputes the entire concept of this season. He says, I'm not sure what the tipping point is when an okay movie year becomes an awesome movie year. But this film watcher feels that 2012 was very much not an awesome year for movies.
Yeah.
And then he went on to suggest that we talk about Here Comes the Boom. So thanks, Ryan.
I like that. I like that he's taken a year to task,
Yes. I feel like we hopefully proved him wrong that there were a lot of interesting movies for us to talk about for this year.
I feel like it too, but Dread wasn't one of them.
All right. That's fine. So here we are at the end again. And as Jason mentioned, if you are a Patreon subscriber at the By David Rosen Patreon, where we have bonus material from Dave's podcast, Piecing It Together, as well as Dave's music, you can also check out our bonus episode on Jiro Dreams of Sushi that will be out. But for all our non-Patreon listeners, do you want to let them know what's coming up next, Jason?
Josh, we've been planning the next season for a long time. When you think of the modern blockbuster, Josh, you have to go back to a time that is no longer modern. 1975 with Jaws, the kind of precursor to it all. And then as you kind of roll out the rest of that year, you're just like, holy cow, so many good movies of this year. We're going to 1975, Josh. Awesome movie year.
I am very excited for that one. And we are starting with the box office champion. So tune in next time for Jaws. And thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.